In this lesson we'll be drawing some pretty pictures and learning about loops, cascading messages and various types of Smalltalk variables. Even if you're not interested in the Smalltalk language, this may help you get a real feel for pure object-oriented programming, so you'll be able to write better code in Java, C++, Ruby, C#, or whatever other object-oriented language you happen to be using. But Smalltalk is a great language in its own right and lots of fun to use. So if you want to follow along, download a free copy of Squeak Smalltalk and let's get started. I'm Hugh, and this is another lesson in my series on the big ideas of object orientation. The Smalltalk V tutorial is the book that I'm using as the basis of this course, and you can download a free PDF copy of that tutorial from the link down below the video. We've now arrived at the end of chapter 3 on page 49, and we hit a problem: turtle graphics. The Smalltalk V tutorial uses something called the turtle in this section to draw pictures. This, by the way, was written for a version of Smalltalk V dating from the 1980s. You can see it there. Now, originally it was running, as on this PC, under the MS-DOS operating system. The version running here on the other PC behind me here, well, that's Smalltalk V for Windows 3.1, which was released in the early 90s. And you can see here some examples of turtle graphics and turtle graphic demos. Now Squeak, that's the version over here, that's the version of Smalltalk that I've been using in these lessons, and it hasn't got a turtle. Okay, so what is a turtle anyway? Put simply, a turtle is something you can move around the screen in order to draw lines, and turtle graphics were popularized by the Logo programming language, which was an educational language developed way back in the 1960s. The idea is that you have a line drawing object that you can move around the screen by telling it to go forward or backward and to turn so many degrees whenever you want it to change its direction. This way of drawing graphics works well in Smalltalk because you can control the turtle by sending it messages, and as I've said many times in the series, message sending is at the heart of Smalltalk programming. Now chapter 3 has lots of example code like this. But that doesn't work in Squeak because there is no object called turtle. But fear not, there is a way around that problem. Before I explain my solution, I should point out that Squeak has a very big range of graphics capabilities. These include some graphics classes, as you can see here, and also some morphic classes and some eToys classes. Now, you can see all of these and you can browse around the classes in your own time using the Squeak class browser. Let's have a look at a few examples. Here are some quick examples of using some of the morph tools, a rectangle morph, and I press Alt-D to do it, and you can see the rectangle is drawn up here. Now when I've finished, I can click my middle mouse button or wheel, and that brings up this frame of different icons. I just close it by clicking that one. Do another one, a polygon morph, Alt-D, up it pops, get rid of that, and finally an ellipse morph, Alt-D, and there we are. So what exactly is a turtle object? Well, here I've loaded up Smalltalk V and I can just try it out by selecting turtle, and in Smalltalk V the command is show it, and it shows me it's a recording pen. So maybe a pen object in Squeak will do the job. Well, I'll try that out presently, but first let's see what kind of turtle graphics the Smalltalk V system's capable of. It's got some demos already set up here, graphics demo. So all of these are drawn using the turtle, so let's try a few of them. Mandala, okay, and dragon, and some spirals. And here I am back in Squeak. Let's see what I can do in Squeak. Here I've written these simple lines of code to test out some of the graphics. Here's a mandala, so in Squeak I can just do it, and there's my mandala, and a dragon, Simple dragon, let's try a multicolored dragon, so it takes a little bit more coding. And there you go, some more complicated dragon, and finally a spiral. So that's some of the sorts of graphics that I'm doing in Squeak using a pen rather than a turtle. Towards the end of this lesson, I'll explain how we can add our own turtle object to Squeak. For now though, I'll create a pen object whenever the Smalltalk V tutorial uses a turtle. Let's go back to chapter 3 of the tutorial and see what we can do. We're on page 49 and we come to the heading expression series. Here's a series of expressions which you can evaluate as a single unit, it says, and it shows you some code, and then it goes on to say that each message in the series is separated from the next by a period. We put each message on a separate line purely for appearance. The receiver of all the messages is the object turtle. Well, I've rewritten this by creating a pen object and sending all the messages to that, one line at a time. So I've selected the code here, right click and let me do it and see what happens. And there you can see I've got this blue triangle up here. Next up, cascaded messages. A cascaded message is a shorthand way of writing a series of messages that are sent to the same receiver. Now what this means is that instead of sending each message one at a time to an object, such as my pen object or the turtle object shown here, I can send multiple messages to the same object with each message separated by a semicolon. Let's look at my code in Squeak. You can see that I've written that code here. If you compare it with the previous version, I had to specify pen each time and send the messages one by one. By dividing the messages with semicolons, I just specify the pen once at the top, and then I can cascade the messages, send all those messages to it. Let's see what happens. Right click and do it. Watch in the top left corner of the screen there, and it draws the same sort of triangle, but this time for clarity I've made this one green. Next in the tutorial we come to simple loops. You can of course read through this in your own time, but essentially if I go back to Squeak, I can see that I'm doing quite a lot of repetition of all these go and turn messages. So instead of doing that, I'll put those inside a loop. And in this example, the argument to, here you can see this example here, the argument to the times repeat message is a block of code. Blocks of code are written as a series of messages enclosed in square brackets. Let's do this one. And you can see up at the top of the screen, I've got yet another triangle, but this time without so much repeating code. And next in the Smalltalk tutorial we come to temporary variables. Now up to now I've created variables just whenever I need them, and those variables hang around so I can carry on using them. Now here for example I've created a new pen object, and when I've finished, let's evaluate that first of all, so do it, and when I finish with it I can print it, Control P, and it shows it's a pen, so the pen object is still there. But I don't always want variables to hang around like that. Sometimes I want to have temporary variables that are discarded as soon as I've finished with them. To do that, I can place the variable name between a pair of upright bars, and that's what I've done up here with my pen. You can see it's been declared between upright bars. Now if I do this, so I've evaluated that code. You can see the little triangles appeared up here. But when I finished with it, let's see if I can print the value here. Nope, nil. You see, so that variable, my pen, has been discarded once I finished with it because it's a temporary variable. Smalltalk V now gives this example to compute an array of factorials. For Squeak, I've had to rewrite that code a bit. You can see it's here, because Squeak won't let me modify an array that's declared in the way shown in the Smalltalk V tutorial, just with a hash between parentheses like that. In Squeak, I can't modify that sort of array, and instead I've had to put the numbers between curly brackets and separate the elements with dots. However, that's a minor syntax matter and nothing that we need to worry too much about for the purposes of this tutorial. The important thing to note is the three temporary variables, temp, index and factorials. Let me just do this and print it. You can see it returns that array. But the important thing, as I said, is that the variables are discarded after use, and I can just try one of those here, Control P, and you can see it's nil, or one of the others, temp. Okay, so those are temporary variables. Next up, assignment expressions. Well, I don't plan to take too long explaining those. Assignment in Smalltalk is done using colon equals. It's the same syntax that you're familiar with if you've programmed in Pascal. Return expressions, the caret is put before the value that's returned by some code, and you'll see many examples of that in the methods shown in the class browser, as well as some of the code that I've already shown. Now, more interesting for us is the next section, global variables. Smalltalk V has many objects built into it, many of which are contained in global variables. Unlike temporary variables, Smalltalk does not automatically dispose of global variables when you're finished with them, and their use is not confined to a single set of expressions. Global variable names always begin with an uppercase letter, with the remainder upper and lowercase letters and digits. Now, not all the global variables defined in Smalltalk V are defined in Squeak, which brings me back to where we started, that turtle. Now, let's have a look again at some code. This is my first attempt at translating Smalltalk V's little example program using a turtle to draw a polygon flower. Now, as before, I've done this using a pen object. Let me press Control D to do it, and you can see there's my flower has popped up. The main differences here, the main changes that I've had to make, is that I've had to use this syntax to set the colour. I've put the pen down to start drawing, and I've placed its starting position as a point 220 pixels down and across, and that's a bit different if you look at the code in the Smalltalk V tutorial. The code is a little bit different, but the actual code, the code that does the drawing, is pretty much unchanged, other than the fact that I don't use the global variable turtle because Squeak doesn't have one, which leaves me with that unresolved problem. How do I create a global variable? Well, let's first find out what global variables already exist. Now, this bit of code up here will show me what the global variables are. Don't worry about how it works, it's not particularly relevant to this tutorial. Pay attention to the names it returns. So let me evaluate and print that, and you can see this is what it returns. Now, some of these may be unfamiliar, but you may already have seen transcript, which is the area that we sometimes use for displaying output, and of course Smalltalk, which is the object representing the state of the Smalltalk system or Smalltalk image. Notice that these are key value pairs. The key is a name such as Smalltalk. The value is an object of the type shown on the right, such as Smalltalk image, but there's no turtle. Smalltalk, the object that represents the state of the Smalltalk system, is an instance of the Smalltalk image class. I've actually already had a little look here, and I can see Smalltalk image has this @:put method, which lets me put items into the system dictionary. So that's what I need to do this job. So let's have a look, go back to my code. So this is the code I've written to add turtle as a key, that's a global variable, and put a new pen there. So let's do that. So that evaluates the code. Now let's see if turtle now exists, and show that, or print it rather. And it says it's a pen, so that's looking quite promising. Incidentally, if you want to remove a global once you've created, this code down here will do that. I'm not going to evaluate it now because I actually want to hang on to the turtle for the time being. So I should now be able to write my polygon flower code using a turtle. So here I've had pen. Let's have a look at my polygon code rewritten. This time you can see it's basically the same as the code that went before, but this time it uses turtle, and let's see if this now works. So you can see it's drawn the red polygon flower up in the workspace at the top. So there you are. Incidentally, it's a really good exercise to try to convert sample code from Smalltalk V to Squeak, as I've had to do in this lesson. In my experience, at first sight, some of the incompatibilities between Smalltalk V code and Squeak may seem a bit baffling, but usually there's a fairly simple way to fix any problems. You may have to search through the class library, of course, the classes in the class browser, and you could try out bits of code in the workspace. This process of trial and error is in fact a very effective way of learning Smalltalk. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this lesson, and if so, give it a thumbs up and feel free to leave a comment down below. And to be notified whenever I upload new lessons, click the subscribe button and also click that bell.